Joining us is Adam Creighton, columnist at The Australian. Adam, thank you so much for joining us and welcome home. You spent years in Washington, DC. Have you ever witnessed such a rapid change that we're really seeing take place right now?
No, look, certainly I haven't. I mean, not in my journalistic career of 13 years at this stage have I ever seen such a flurry of change in such a short period of time. I mean, the COVID era, of course, was pretty spectacular in 21 and 2020, but this is pretty intense. It's not just in the health field, of course, it's in economics, it's in foreign policy. I mean, Trump is just this extraordinary historical force, if you like, who, by the way, 2 years ago was completely written off. But of course has had this spectacular comeback. He's now president and he's been in office a very short time and just done an extraordinary and controversial number of things.
Absolutely. We're seeing that right now. Just yesterday, Donald Trump announced that he sees US ownership of Gaza as a long-term prospect. Now, he made those comments during his first meeting with Israel's Prime Minister, and he sent shockwaves around the world. Adam, is Trump serious about this? How do you see this playing out?
Well, look, it's very hard to know. I mean, certainly the announcement was absolutely spectacular and historic, and I think very few people were expecting it, and I think half the world is still trying to digest it. But look, if we just go to a week earlier, or a few days earlier with the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, there was a lot of fanfare and they never happened. So this may be something like that. It might be an opening gambit to get a broader agreement in the Middle East amongst the Arab nations and also Israel. But certainly, I think, I can't see it happening personally. I think it's going to be very, very hard for the US to take ownership of Gaza unless it wants to endure loss of soldiers. I mean, there will obviously be terrorism if they try to take it, and it's going to be very, very difficult to forcibly remove 2 million people or 1.7 million people. So I think it's a very difficult task. And of course, it goes against what Trump actually ran on, which was, to pull the US out of foreign entanglements. This is the complete opposite, of course. And so you do see on social media and amongst his base a lot of disappointment in this announcement.
It's interesting you mentioned the tariffs. So I thought of that as well, that it's just a couple of days after Trump made those announcements about threatening tariffs of 25% to Canada, to Mexico, and then just shortly after that announcement, Trump essentially got what he wanted. Mexico and Canada announced that they'd finally start taking action to stop fentanyl flowing into the United States. And so the tariffs have been paused for a month. So I guess the world is kind of seeing the way Donald Trump works, how he's able to bring other countries to the negotiating table. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, look, I think that is how I see it. And he also claims it as a big political win, both against Canada and also Mexico. And I guess to some extent that's true. He threatened them with something and then they changed their behaviour. Well, at least they're saying that they're going to change their behaviour in some way. And of course, we saw the same just a week earlier with Colombia. Of course, he threatened them too, and they quickly changed their mind within 7 hours about accepting their citizens back. So I think we're going to see a pattern of this throughout his presidency. And let's hope Australia doesn't get brought into this, but maybe it will at some point. Who knows? He doesn't seem to really care much about tradition and about traditional alliances. That's part of the Trump phenomenon. It's a move away from that, from what a lot of politicians used to call the rules-based global order. Well, that is certainly over now. Trump doesn't really care anything for that. And I think you won't be hearing politicians talk about it anymore because it's too embarrassing.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt says that the mainstream media just can't keep up with the good news flowing out of President Trump's White House. Here she is.
There is so much good news, so much winning out of the Trump White House right now that the mainstream legacy media can't keep up with it because President Trump is signing executive order after executive order, delivering on promise after promise, and implementing fundamental change of our bloated bureaucracy and our corrupt government here in Washington, D.C. He was given a once-in-a-generation mandate by the American people to govern and to fundamentally transform Washington, and that's exactly what he is doing.
In a way, she's right. There have been so many news lines, so many major announcements, and it just shows you how prepared Trump is to be making these. It feels like he's about 10 steps ahead of everyone else. But Donald Trump is also shaking up the way the media is being run inside the White House. He's open to having podcasters and content creators allowed in the briefing room. You've spent a bit of time there. What do you make of this decision?
Well, look, Of course, it reflects the the simmering hatred of the Trump people for the traditional media. So I think it's damaging for the legacy media in the US that they're going to have more competition in the briefing room. The briefing room itself is actually very small. I mean, people see the press secretary speak on TV, but very rarely does the camera turn around. It's a small room. Not everyone can fit in, and so I think by allowing these other podcasters and influencers and so forth in, and I'm not saying it's a bad decision, but it just physically means that fewer legacy media types will be physically allowed in the room because they're going to have to be on a rotation now. So I think it's bad for legacy media, but this is hardly surprising. And just on the pace of the decisions, I mean, I was actually in DC for the first week or so of his first presidency, and that was largely chaos and nothing happened at all. So the contrast with this is extreme. As you say, he's so well prepared. And I think the quality of people around him and the determination of people around him and the cohesion is much greater this time, and you're seeing the results of that.
Absolutely. And in a sign that's not good for legacy media, it's been revealed today that USAID was handing over millions of dollars to the left-wing media outlet Politico. Look, I was shocked to hear this morning. What's your reaction?
Yeah, look, I was shocked too. It's just so embarrassing. I mean, it really is. I mean, the mainstream media, let's be frank, large swathes of it have been very embarrassed by pushing things that have turned out to be wrong, whether it's the laptop, whether it's, various aspects of COVID. And now it comes out that the Democratic arm of the US state, if you like, this agency called USAID, which has been propping up various institutions all around the world that are very closely aligned to the Democratic Party. They were also giving money to this media giant, which is owned, it's called Politico in the US, but it's owned by Axel Springer, which is a big German publisher. And Politico also happens to be fairly rabidly anti-Trump. So it's a very, very bad look. And I think it'll have ramifications, widespread ramifications, this.
I think so, indeed. Now, podcaster Joe Rogan has blasted Kamala Harris's team for essentially lying about why Kamala Harris never went on the Joe Rogan podcast. They came up with plenty of excuses, like the date clashed with when Donald Trump was recording his. But Joe Rogan has called them out for their BS. Here he is.
No one ever committed to doing it. This is really important because they keep pretending that I lied or I did this or I did that. They never committed to doing it. Well, we went through, I've got a whole, we have all the receipts, by the way.
Of course.
I have a whole list of conversations that took place. They never said she was going to do it. So this whole idea that we her over and then we over for Trump, incorrect, just not true.
Adam, I don't think it's a smart move to lie about anyone or anything, but especially when it involves someone like Joe Rogan, who has such an enormous reach.
Yeah, look, that's certainly true, but it's kind of no surprise to me that she didn't want to go on that show because she couldn't have handled it. I think she wanted to lead him on and to keep her name in the media and to have people wonder about the prospect of her being on the podcast. But of course, she couldn't do it. I mean, it's a long form interview, and we all know she did very few of those. Indeed, her strategy for the first couple of months from when she was leader was not to do any media at all. And then when she started doing more media, her favorability ratings fell fairly rapidly. So look, I mean, I think if she had have done it, I think it would have been even worse, the result of the election. So, for Democrats, I mean. So yeah, but look, it is embarrassing, all the lying and stuff. And the curious thing, I don't know why Joe Rogan didn't say this before the election, but anyway, it's he said it now, and I suppose it's not surprising.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I wonder if the offer is still on the table. I'm not sure if she's still up to a 3-hour interview with Joe Rogan. I'm not sure how many people would listen to it either. But what's your take on the future of the Democrats? It just feels like they're more irrelevant than ever.
Yeah, look, I think the party's been severely wounded. I mean, the reality is their political strategy for many presidential elections has been to appeal to all the minority groups, if you like, and of course women too, even though they're not a minority, but that they're kind of, bucketed as one. And, Trump had swings towards him amongst all these groups, every single one. And so I think, trying to curry favor with Black Americans or Hispanic Americans, I think this is over. And so there's an existential crisis for the Democrat Party, I think. And also some of the stuff they're saying now is still so unhinged and out of touch with American people. Like I just read today that some of them are going to try to impeach Trump. I mean, this is this playbook did not work. Did not work. You tried this many times. You tried the lawfare, and he won in a landslide. So they really need a new political playbook going forward. I think it's going to take at least a year to work out what that is.
They really do. I think that playbook actually helped Donald Trump, but they haven't learnt the lesson. Look, finally, Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi has been confirmed. Here she is during the confirmation hearing.
Can I answer the question?
Well, my question
I would have plenty of staff. You said, of course you want.
You'll be able to review hundreds of cases on the first day?
I'm not going to mislead this body, nor you.
All right, let me ask another question. You don't want to answer that. Let me ask another question.
You were censured by Congress, Senator, for comments just like this that are so reckless.
Pam Bondi is getting straight to work. She's already ordered the DOJ to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. So those cities that refuse to cooperate with federal immigration authorities will potentially be cut off. Adam, what's your assessment of this?
Well, look, I think this was just always virtue signaling in the first place. I mean, we saw when the Republican governors in southern states, in Florida and in Texas, started to send to bus and fly thousands of illegal immigrants to Chicago and to New York and to various other so-called sanctuary cities, that they didn't want these people. And so it's just all nonsense. And so I think what the US federal government's going to do makes sense. I mean, they shouldn't be funding virtue signaling. So, if states individually want to pay for this nonsense for these various centres and so forth, you let them. But I don't see why the federal government should be helping. And as for the new Attorney General, I mean, she performed extremely well in her hearings, which you just saw some of then. And I think she's going to do a good job, I think.
I think so too. Adam Creighton, great to chat to you again. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thanks, Gabrielle.